Couple of weeks ago, the topic of MongoDB came up in my job. My team, just to give you a little bit of background, has a lot of experienced DBAs with tons of experience with relational databases like DB2 and Microsoft SQL, but Mongo was a bit of a mystery to all of us. Specifically, the way that it stores data is a little bit different. Through reading documentation and watching a few YouTube tutorials, I made this video to get anyone who wants to learn up to speed. And no, it's not going to be just theory and terms, it's actually going to be hands-on as well. As with all things in tech, touching the technologies is the best way to learn. So we're actually going to get our hands dirty and build out a Mongo database and put all of these concepts that we go over together. All right, before we do anything, there are a couple concepts that we need to go ahead and get out the way so everything else makes sense and falls in line. First off, the thing that confused me and all of the other DBAs, or should I say the DBAs because I'm not a DBA, is the fact that Mongo doesn't store data in tables with rows and columns. Instead, it stores data in documents. These documents are comprised of field value pairs, similar to JSON and Python dictionaries. And if you have a group of multiple related documents, then what you have on your hands is called a collection. And multiple collections is what makes up a database. So it's similar to how if you have multiple tables, then that comes together and that makes a database in relational databases like MS SQL and DB2. Those are all the terms that you need to get an understanding of before you can get your hands dirty, because everything now is going to make way more sense when we build on top of that. So let's go ahead and get everything that we need to get installed, and let me tell you what everything is before you start installing everything on your computer. All right, so before we can actually get our hands dirty and everything, we need to install a couple different things. And also, again, hate to say it, but there's just a couple things that you need to understand so you can actually start running and not crawling. So the first thing is you need to know what MongoDB Atlas is, and all it is their cloud database as a service platform. For example, if you wanted to, you could have them host your database and everything, and then you can go through and you can administrate from here. Also, they have a free tier that is really cool that allows you to upload and create your own databases and interact with everything from here, or you could do it locally. And when we say locally, that is where this guy MongoDB Compass comes in. So with Compass, you could actually connect to your databases that are in the cloud or local to you, and you could run commands against the databases and everything. And it's a really nice GUI tool, and I'll show you guys that when it comes up. Also, another thing that you need to install is you actually need to get the server service going on your server so you could actually spin up the MongoDB. Granted, if you don't have the resources, you could always do it in the cloud, and then you could use MongoDB Compass to connect to it while it's in the cloud. But for experience sake, I wanted to actually know what the installation process looked like. And as you can see in the documentation, it's really good in that they show you how to install it on each different version of Linux, as well as Windows, Mac OS, or even Docker. I just didn't deep dive into the whole Docker thing because I wanted to run it bare metal and see how that performed. And then maybe I'll do it in a Docker container just to compare the performance one day. And aside from that, the other thing that you're going to need to download is you're going to need these DB tools, especially if you want to follow along with me in the lab, where what I do is I take a backup of the database, I delete it, and then I restore it from the backup. All right, guys, let's actually go ahead and get our hands dirty, specifically with the MongoDB install on our server. And just for reference, what I did was I spun up an Ubuntu virtual machine to go ahead and play with. And let's go ahead and get SSH into that. And it should be Josh at 172.168.0.166. Yes, I am not worried about me hacking my own stuff. Cool. So we're in. Don't have a lot of resources. Doesn't take a lot of resources. So let's go ahead and get started with these steps right here. I've done this a couple times, so I'm gonna probably zoom through it. First thing we're gonna do is make sure we have this package installed. If it's anything like the last server that I did, everything was already installed for the most part. Yep. So we got that out the way. Next step is we're gonna do this guy. Cool. Next step, gonna do, I almost skipped a step right here. And we're gonna have to do touch. And permission issue as always. So we got that. Oh man, I'm just getting too excited and skipping steps. Cool. Got that guy. Next, we're gonna do a sudo apt get update. Cool. Our screen is getting a little busy, so let's clear it out, and then we'll run the next command. Next, I already know that it's a systemd machine, but in case you don't know, you can run this guy and it'll tell you. One thing I will say about this documentation, it is way better than a lot of other projects that I've used. So we're going to do clear because our screen is getting a little bit busy again. And right before we start up this service, there's a couple things that we need to do. Specifically, we need to sudo vi into the /etc/mongo dconfig. Matter of fact, I don't have vi set up the way that I want, so we can nano into it. Right. So the reason why we're doing this is the computer that I'm actually on is different from this server. So I want to be able to read and write to the database that I'm going to host on this server, and I don't want it to basically not see my traffic. So with this loopback address right here, it's basically saying like, hey, the only IP that's going to be able to interact with this database is itself, because this IP is a loopback IP. I want to make it so any IP address can actually talk to it on my network. And also right here on this 2707, I want to do 2717. Other thing I need to change is I want to be able to connect to this database without authentication. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add authorization. I'm sorry. And we're going to do disabled. So that way anybody can mess with it. So like if I have another server or I have another computer in my network that I want to actually be able to mess around with this thing, then I can easily do that. Wouldn't be the best thing to do in an enterprise situation, because ideally you want something like LDAP or some other type of authentication. So we're going to do this. We're going to save that. Also, we're going to make a directory for this database. So we're going to make mongos permission issue as always. /db1. And now we're going to jump back into our directions that we got right here, and we're going to figure out what they want us to do. So they want us to start the service and basically check the status of it, make sure everything's running correctly. All right, we didn't get yelled at and it didn't say failed to start the service, so we should be good to go. Let's go ahead and test the theory out. Yep, we are good. We officially have a Mongo database. Now I imagine the question is, so what are my different ways of interacting with it? So I'm going to slot this out, and in its place, I'm going to put Mongo Compass. And this was the local GUI tool that I was telling you that you have the ability to use to administrate the MongoDB database if you want. Y'all just struggle here with me right quick. Let me try to get these windows a little bit better for you. All right, so I got these other ones going, but for the sake of the tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and remove these connections. That was some testing I was doing earlier, so I wasn't teaching you guys the wrong thing. So you have two different ways of interacting with the database. You can interact with it from the command line, or you can interact with it from Compass. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to clear our screen up so we can actually focus. And also I'm going to clear our screen again after we run this first command, just so it starts with us already being in the database. And what we're going to do is we're going to type in the MongoD command and the port that we have our database running on. Oh, excuse me. I'm getting ahead of myself. We haven't actually spun up the database yet, so we need to tell it the port that it's going to go into, which is going to be 2717. The db path, and that's going to be this guy, that directory that we just made. Let me go back over here. db1, and if I'm not mistaken, that's going to be good. Right, so we're going to do ps-aux, make sure that's running in the background. All right. Unless I majorly messed up there. So what I got wrong was the fact that right here, you aren't supposed to do the MongoD, you were supposed to do the Mongo shell. And also, I'm going to chop this guy off because I don't need it, because we're not doing a replica set in this tutorial. Right, and if I get lucky today, then we should be able to there we go. So we're actually in the database now after an awkward bit of silence. So let's actually go over the basics of this, and then also let's make this apples to apples. So what we're going to do is we're going to test out if our configuration change actually worked, and we can connect to this guy. So we are using 2717, and the only difference is the IP. Instead of localhost, it should be 172.168.0.166. Save and connect, and we're in. We're apples to apples, the exact same. What you see here is what you see here. Same thing, just interacting with it in a different way. A couple things are just subtracted in the GUI. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check and see if Josh is telling us right. And we could do that first by saying, okay, so I see admin, config, and local as the databases here. So how do I show them here and what commands do I use? And that is pretty simple because all you have to do is show DBs. And as you can see, we have the same one. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create our first database. And what we can do is we can use, for example, inventory, right? And we are in inventory, right? But as you can see right here, it's not created yet because we don't have any data in it. So what I'll do is I will go ahead and do an insert one. Well, if I can copy and paste it off my other screen. All right. So we're going to do this one. And if you wanted to, you could do an insert many. But the main thing about this is inside these brackets is an actual document. And the document is full of those key value pairs I told you about earlier in the tutorial. All right. So we actually can see what we got going on. And then we should be able to sync over here and we can see that guy already being created. And if we want to mess around with it some more, look at that. We already have our document in here. And as you can see, it's a document and we actually have the key value pairs that make it up in there. And that itself is already pretty cool. And then if you wanted to, you could use like the db.inventory.find command. And for example, if we wanted to say, I believe item, nope, not item. Matter of fact, we can learn from the GUI right quick. Click over here to options. Field value. So odds are it's going to be item. And then I know Mongo loves curly braces, so we're going to put that in there as well. And there we go. We returned our object back. Obviously, you can make it more complicated, and also you could take away the ID tag as well if you wanted to. But this just shows you how to do like a simple find on there. And if you wanted to, you could do the same thing here. For example, if you wanted to come here, and this right here is going to say like look through all the documents and then find this specific aspect about it. And then what we'll do is we will do item, fill that in for us. And then we'll do a pencil. And we'll, oh, yep. And it returned it right back to us. Let's see if there's anything else on the docket that I had saw for us. The other things I had wanted to show you are probably best described and showed in the GUI. So for now, we're going to put the command line down, and then I'll show you more about what Compass can do and show you about some of the cool things that I really, really liked about MongoDB. The big thing that I liked about MongoDB was this guy right here. Matter of fact, we can create a new database. Unless, no, we'll do it this way. So we're going to create a new database, and it's going to be called Rugrats. And the connection name, well, the collection name is going to be called characters. All right. And what I really find cool about MongoDB is the fact that you can get a raw JSON file or a raw CSV and directly import it in. Obviously, you could do it through the command line, but I know a lot of people are visual learners like me. So let's go ahead and do that. And for the sake of this tutorial, what I did was I have it in my documents folder, notes, deployments, MongoDB, and our sample data sets. Right, and we're going to import in the Rugrats characters. And as you can see, it was just a JSON file, and it already put everything into the database for me and arranged it and all that. But the cool thing about this data set was it's just all the Rugrats characters and everything. And what's cool is if you wanted to, you could export the full collection relatively easily, and you could put it in CSV or JSON format, and then you could drag and drop it in at another time. And then also you have the option as well to take backups and everything with the DB tools. And that was what I had showed you guys earlier. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of fast forwarding into the future, and I'm going to show you how to take a backup of a database after we delete it. All right, before I let you all go, I wanted to at least talk about the one big thing that at least came up with my team when we talked about speccing out MongoDB and actually switching over to it and everything, was the idea of taking backups and also restoration for if anything happens with the database. So that's actually pretty simple. What we're going to do is we're going to take a backup of our Rugrats database, and then we're going to delete it and we're going to restore to it. And the first thing you do in order to accomplish that is you have to run a mongo dump command on the server itself. If I can even copy and paste right now. On the server itself, it actually has the DB tools on it, but if you're running this from an external server and you're connecting out to it, much like we're doing with Compass right here, then you'll have to download the DB tools like I mentioned earlier. Right, so let's double check this. So we're on port 2717, and we are also on 172.168.0.166. In this case, if we want to do the whole localhost thing instead of IP, we could. Right, as always, permission error, so we're going to sudo. Right. And what we have going on here is we have messed that up, so let's take another one. I meant to do Josh/Mango backups, so it would actually be in the current directory that we're in, right? And as you can see, we have a Rugrats directory, and we can clear our screen up and do that again. So we have a Rugrats directory. Let's go into the Rugrats directory and see what's actually in there. So we had a bson, and we had a JSON metadata and a prelude.json. So the interesting thing is, when I told you before that it was like MongoDB was doing something similar to JSON, but it wasn't necessarily JSON, and that is this binary file that you get right here, and that was like the big difference between JSON and what MongoDB was doing. But long story short, these three files are the files that you need to actually restore with, and you're going to point it at this directory, and it's going to pull everything in and be able to rebuild the database from that. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of our database. Right? And as you can see, if we refresh it, our guy is gone. All our data is gone, man. We're down bad right now. So what we're going to do is we can run a mongo restore command. And all I have to do is correct it in my notes. 2717 and yeah. All right. And we're going to connect to our database. Once again, Josh and those IP addresses. And as you can see here, I just want to make sure that you go ahead and get the full gist that it's gone right now. And also, we're going to Control A and sudo and mongo restore. Finish restoring, 0 failures, and we'll refresh this guy. And we're back. We're back and all our documents are back. All right, guys. If you all have any more questions or anything to do with like MongoDB stuff or OpenShift stuff or anything that you've seen on my channel that you want me to make a video on, then I am more than happy to make a video on it. And then also what I'm going to do is I'm going to write an article about this on my blog to actually show you guys the notes that I was using off screen and everything. But I hope that it gave you at least an introduction to the whole MongoDB thing, and it excites you to actually join the journey of MongoDB. That being said, hope you guys like, comment, and subscribe, and have an awesome one.